Let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
It's actually
in
a big piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin's Administrator Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, your host, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Johnny Rickard. Hello, Johnny. How are you?
I'm good, man. How's it going?
Good. I'm a little, I'm going to say intimidated today because I'm producing and I'm doing my normal thing. So Stephanie's got a previous engagement. She wasn't able to join and do her normal thing today. So my apologies to anyone and everyone who, like, Stephanie's the one who's always coordinating us on the back end and making sure that everything looks good and links go out and all this other stuff. So I'll be a little bit slow on it. But hopefully I can get through it.
Well, so far so good. We got started. So I mean, that's probably the hardest part.
You know, it was like 3 button pushes and I was a little nervous about that. It's like, this is the right one, you know. You're not at home either.
No, I'm not. I'm at the Open Source Summit in Austin. So I'll be working in the Red Hat booth. It's like as soon as you go in one of the main doors.
Yeah. So Open Source Summit is that's not the rebranded Open Infrastructure Summit, which used to be OpenStack Summit. So which one is this?
Yeah, this is a Linux Foundation event that, you know, it's almost like a KubeCon where there's a bunch of like mini events going on around it. Like there's a security summit, there's another one, and then there's a bunch of sponsors and you know, talks about open source and, you know, all the big topics right now, you know, DevSecOps and, you know, supply chain security, all the big ones, you know. So there should be.
Don't know anything about any of those.
I know. Yeah, that's the next, you know, or Site 4.0.
I say that tongue in cheek because Johnny and I and some of the folks on my team have had a ongoing task around supply chain security stuff. So. Mm-hmm. Lots of interesting stuff. So yeah, glad to see that you made it out and all that other stuff. Hopefully you don't get kicked out of the whatever room you've commandeered there.
Yeah, I'm sitting at the head of the table, so at least I look like I'm important. So I'm just gonna, like, you know, scowl at people. You know,
yeah.
I'm naturally aggressive. I'm just gonna present that way. So.
Yeah, you got to be real animated and act like you just belong there, like you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm just start flexing.
All right. Well, today we are joined by Jimmy Alvarez. So Jimmy is technical marketing manager, right?
Product marketing manager.
Product marketing manager. Okay. Well, you're the most technical PMM I think I know, so I won't hold that against you. So Jimmy is PMM for ACM, or Red Hat OpenShift. Excuse me. It is Red Hat OpenShift Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes. No, wait. There's no OpenShift in there.
Almost close. You almost had it. It's Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes. It's a very long name, but you were there. Almost there.
ACM, or sometimes you'll hear us call it Rackham, you know, as that abbreviation. Yeah, I don't know why I added OpenShift in there. I knew as soon as I said it that was wrong because it has Kubernetes on the end.
But you committed, right. So you know, we commend you for it.
Yeah, you went all the way. So that's great. That's great. The commitment was there, so I take it. I take it.
What's that? Act like you belong, right?
That's right.
Fake it till you make it. So today Jimmy is going to be talking about what we collectively will be talking about Advanced Cluster Manager 2.5, which was released, I guess 2 weeks ago or so, something like that.
Yeah, about a week and a half ago. Yeah.
Okay. And this release in particular, in my mind, sticks out because there's a lot of really cool stuff that it has both happened and is in the process of happening with ACM. And I think it's going to be really important for us as administrators to see the things that are going on and how they're going to affect us, particularly with cluster lifecycle and application management and lots of other stuff inside of there. So ACM is something that it is becoming more and more at the forefront of, in particular, and as you might guess from the name, right, multi-cluster management. You know, if you've got more than one OpenShift cluster, my general thought process is you should be really strongly considering using ACM. So ACM is just, I've been getting a lot more familiar with it recently, and I am constantly impressed. And also wonder why on earth I was torturing myself before trying to do like I've got 5 or 6 different clusters that I'm trying to juggle, and doing individual management is just not fun. It takes
It's appreciation. It helps you appreciate the automation.
yeah
That's right.
yeah
That's right.
that's
And one important thing to know too is that it's just not just OpenShift, right? We go beyond. This is why there is the Kubernetes part of the name in the software, right? Because we go beyond Kubernetes. We can also do, I should say, beyond OpenShift. We can do, AKS. We can do, all of the major kind of Kubernetes kind of distributions that are out there.
Mhm.
We can import them and manage them from ACM. So yes, if you're an administrator and you have multiple clusters, not only on-prem but off-prem, you should pay attention to this one, I think.
Agreed. And ACM, it has its lineage in IBM, right?
That's right.
It was the
That's
first
right.
thing that came over from IBM, if I recall correctly.
That is correct. So it used to be a feature within a bigger set of product, right? So it was like a massive product that, and there was this tiny feature that really kind of shined, right? So when the acquisition happened, it was decided that we would remove that feature from that larger piece of software, and we'll make it into a standalone product. And in just almost 3 years now that we've been really working with the software, almost 2.5 actually, it's become a very important piece of software if you're an administrator and you're working with any kind of Kubernetes, right? So
Yeah, I remember, what was it? ICP, IBM Cloud Private was the IBM Kubernetes, and then the acquisition happened, which, holy crap, has it really been almost 3 years since that happened?
Dude,
it has.
I know.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Which means that, I'll have been here almost 4 years now. Just
I'm
another
right
month.
behind you.
Yeah.
I'm right behind you. 1 year behind you. So 3 years.
Yeah.
Puppies. You guys are puppies.
And
We
well,
At least at Red Hat, it doesn't mean, I mean, it's been all over the industry for over 20 years, but at Red Hat, yes.
Yeah,
I guess we are puppies.
all right. Well, I'll hold off on asking you any more questions until we get a little further on. So I'll go ahead and move into our top of mind topics. So first, or before I do that, I'll do a quick introduction of our stream as a whole. So the Ask an OpenShift Admin live stream is a part of the Office Hours series of streams here on Red Hat Live Streaming. What that means is that we are here to answer your questions. So sort of anything and everything that is at the top of your mind, any questions you have about OpenShift itself, we'll do our best to answer those questions. If Johnny and I or Jimmy or whoever's joining us for today doesn't know the answer, then we generally have pretty deep ties back into product management and engineering and all of the different organizations inside of Red Hat. So we'll do our best to get those answered. If we can do it here on the stream, and you'll see Johnny usually is typing away and asking questions and going crazy on Slack and GChat in the background. But if we can answer them during the stream, we'll do that. If not, then we can always follow up through the blog post. We can follow up through next week's stream, so on and so forth. So don't hesitate to ask those questions. You can also reach out kind of if you're not watching this live, you can reach out through email. So you can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. Here's where I need Stephanie to help me out here. Let's see. So if I click this button and then I click this button, there we go. So you can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or you can reach out via the various social media platforms you see there at Practical Andrew on Twitter, on Reddit, on all of those things. So don't hesitate to reach out at any point in time. I'll also point out that Johnny can also be reached. So JRockTX1 on the social media and Johnny@redhat.com. No H inside of there. I've known you for like 15 years, Johnny, and I still have to remind myself of that every time I send you an email.
You and everyone else.
I was just gonna say it's too weird. It's too weird. Where's
so my
that
last
H?
name is Rickard too. So like it always gets misspelled. Richard. Yeah, it's
Richard.
pretty bad.
Johnny Richard.
All
Johnny
the time.
Richard.
All right, so let's take that away, and we'll switch back to the view with all three of our lovely faces on it. All right, so top of mind topics. Just a couple of things this week. I would say it's been relatively quiet, but there's been a lot of kind of internal, I won't say internal things, but just a lot of general chatter, right? Nothing big, nothing, super super worthy of being highlighted. One conversation that did come up that I thought was really interesting is, I think a lot of times, I think a lot of folks, a lot of administrators, a lot of developers encounter a scenario where they look at their cluster and see that real CPU, real memory utilization is low, certainly, within acceptable ranges. But when they're trying to schedule workload, it says that there aren't enough resources available. And really what this comes down to is requests, right? So from the Kubernetes scheduler perspective, when a pod defines a request, either for CPU or for memory, that is tantamount to a reservation from the scheduler's perspective. So the scheduler will say, whatever amount of CPU I am now, even if you're not using it, I am now considering that used, and I will not schedule workload that may or may not be a part of that. And that can go the other way around too, right? So maybe real CPU utilization is at some level, maybe it's at 50%, and a pod comes in and it's requesting, 51% of those resources. Well, there is not enough actual resources available for that, so it wouldn't be able to schedule that. So one thing I wanted to do real quick is kind of look at what that might look like inside of here. And nope, that is not what I wanted. So we will share this screen here. And I'm going to adjust the size of it a little bit to make it easier to read. All right, so this is I just deployed this cluster here on Azure. And it's just an out-of-the-box cluster. I do this before every stream. With each one of the streams, I provision us a cluster, so that way we're able to bang around and do the things that we need to do with it. So if we look inside of here on this cluster utilization overview page, so I'm just on the cluster overview page down here under CPU, you'll notice that there's two things represented in each one of these charts. So one, the blue graph is the actual real CPU utilization for the cluster. So this is how much the pods are actually, right, how much is actually being used across the whole cluster. The orange dotted line is the amount of requests that have been submitted against that particular resource. So if we hover over it, it's kind of hard to see, but if we hover over it, you can see this 3.01 at 10:13 a.m. That's the real resource utilization with a 7.5 total requested. We'll also notice that this number doesn't reflect that requested number. It reflects the real utilization. So my cluster as a whole has 36 CPUs worth of resources, and 2.93, so 36 minus 2.93 equals that 33 point, well, now it's 96, so 0.04 number. Even though if I'm scheduling new workloads, new pods that have requests, I can only request up to 28 and a half or so. So this is where it gets confusing, right? Because we don't report this anywhere else in the GUI. If I come down here to observe and go to metrics, or excuse me, go to dashboards, like if I click around in here and look for pods, this is showing me resource utilization across each one of the nodes, but it's not showing me requests. So this graph is resource utilization for each one of the pods that's running on there. Here's the quota that's been enforced inside of there. Memory utilization, same thing, memory quota, right? None of these reflect any of those requests. So how do we actually see that information? So one, if I were to schedule a pod, it'll basically go into the scheduling pending stage, and you'll be able to look at the details. And inside of there, it will say, so let's look, I'm just going to choose a random pod here. So if we look in the events here, it'll have an alert about how it cannot schedule, right? 0 of 3 nodes are unavailable because of a taint. Usually that's the control plane with regular workload. And then it'll say, X out of however many nodes unavailable due to resource constraints or whatever reasons. So how can I tell what my actual node utilization looks like? So if we go to our nodes, and I'm going to pick on one of my worker nodes here and look at the details, we can see like node and disk pressure, even if this is false, right? So it's not experiencing memory, CPU, disk pressure, etc. That can still prevent that scheduling from happening. And does it show up in here? I thought it showed up in here. Maybe it doesn't. I'm almost positive that it shows up in here though. So here's our capacity, right? So we'll see our CPU, 4 CPUs of capacity. We'll see the total amount of memory. We'll see the configured number of pods. We've got allocatable, right? So it's saying that even though there's 4 CPUs, I can only allocate 3.5 of those. So that missing 0.5 will come from the system level resource reservations. So that's the amount of resources that Kubelet reserves for its own operations. We've talked about that before. There's a way that you can set it to auto configure. So that way it will configure a different amount based off of the size of the node. So if it has more CPUs, it reserves more resources or more memory. It reserves more of those resources for doing self-management type of tasks. But I also thought, and now I'm going to have to go over here. So if I do an OC get node, do an OC describe node, one of these guys. So way down here at the bottom, this is what I was looking for. So we've got this CPU and we've got this memory, and it breaks it out into requests and limits. So you can see that in requests, we've got 19% of the CPU being allocated. Even though if I do something like OC ADM top node, and we'll do the same node. The node, not the part that I highlighted there. So even though if we look at our node, actual CPU utilization is 5%. So the pods are using 5% of the CPU, but we have tied up in reservations 19% of the CPU. So a lot of times this is why folks will get confused as to, I looked at my node, it's using almost no CPU, but it's telling me it's out of resources and I can't actually use that. I'll also point out that limits have no bearing on this. So you can have a limit in place of kind of anything, and it won't affect the scheduling of those resources. Limits are important in conjunction with requests because it helps set the QoS class associated with our pods. So let's do an OC get pod. If I look at one of these pods, so we'll choose this guy. So OC get pod in OpenShift SDN -o yaml pipe to less. If I look at my pod here, our QoS class is burstable. So this is affected by the combination of that limit and request. So by default, if there's no QoS and no request and no limit set, it gets as burstable, I think. It's up, right? I thought that was what I wanted. So, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, there's 3 classes. Burstable, guaranteed, and Johnny or Jimmy, help me out. What's the other one?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I was trying to remember exactly what you were saying.
Quotas, nope. Yeah, anyways, so the biggest thing that they affect is, so here we can see CPU memory limits and requests match, so therefore it sets a QoS class of guaranteed. So down here, if we scroll down, QoS class of burstable, right, we can see that the limit is more than the request. So
Best effort.
Best effort, thank you.
Or as Christian puts it, kind of guaranteed.
Yeah, but so best effort will be the lowest one, which is basically there are no requests, there are no limits, so it gets whatever it gets. And then the effect here is what happens when there's contention, and eventually eviction needs to happen. So it will start with the pods that are best efforts and begin doing terminations of those to get this resource consumption below the threshold. If it has, evicted all of those best efforts, and of course other things like pod disruption budget and all that come into play as well, then it'll move on to burstable, and then it'll move on to guaranteed as kind of a last resort. So all of this is to say that requests are basically a reservation from the scheduler's perspective. Limits have no direct effect on scheduling, but they can affect the QoS class when used in conjunction with a request, and that can affect scheduling, particularly when there is contention. So as administrators, I think it's important that we just be aware of what's going on inside of our cluster. So if I click back up here to our overview, one of the really cool things about the admin console here is I can click on this graph, and it takes me and it shows me exactly the PromQL that's used in order to generate this. So it should be possible. I don't have an example offhand because if I'm honest, I'm terrible at PromQL. But you should be able to create a query in here and create a grafana chart or something like that in order to plot that out and be able to see it on both an individual node basis as well as across the entire cluster. Maybe I should ask somebody if we can come up with an example for that. I don't know who in the monitoring or the metrics side would be able to do that. And I'll take this point in time to highlight that ACM also aggregates all of this information up. So you can also look at all this stuff through ACM's metrics.
Yeah,
too.
I was going to say it's much easier to look at it. ACM completely aggregates all of this, puts it on a nice Grafana dashboard for you. You can very easily consume it. If you want to go further and drive deeper into it, you can also extract all that information and put it somewhere else for another monitoring system to look at.
Yeah.
This is why you need ACM.
Yeah. One of many reasons, right? And I realized I've been sitting here looking at the interface, waiting for chat to go by, and in the producer interface, it goes it goes bottom up instead of top down like it does in the other interface, which is confusing me. Why is nobody chatting? Y'all are so quiet today. No.
Oh no, there was plenty of chat. We even see a familiar face. I even see a familiar face in the chat. Christian, hello.
Yeah, don't try to put 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. I was just having a conversation with the account team this morning about that. They are seeing CPU ready time on their vSphere environment, and it means there's contention, and that means that bad things are going to happen. So you got to be careful at all levels, particularly when you're using virtualization. All right, I've spent enough time on this particular topic. So the last thing, or the only other thing that I had for today's top of mind topics was just to be aware that we are now 4 months away from OpenShift 4.6 being unsupported. So if you're using 4.6 EOS, 4 months is the countdown. I believe 4.7 is end of support in August. So I think 4.6 is October, 4.7 is August. Yes, that's slightly strange because remember we changed the policy with 4.6 or after 4.6. So 4.6 EUS had 2 years of support. 4.8 restarted EUS with 18 months of support for all releases. So that's why that is a little out of order there. However, if you are not able to update off of 4.6 to 4.8 or later before August, so remember I said 4.7 technically goes out of support in August, which is before 4.6 goes out of support, we still support that update path. So you would still be supported if you go 4.6, 4.7, 4.8 as a part of that upgrade path. You just would not be supported if you went from 4.6 to 4.7 and stayed on 4.7. That would be an unsupported release until you get to 4.8, except as a part of the upgrades. So, all right, I'm done. That's all I got for top of mind topics. Johnny, Jimmy, anything?
Yeah, I don't have anything other than Stephanie picking on the side to say make sure that you guys like and subscribe. On YouTube or Twitch, make sure that you do that so that way you can get all the updated streams that are coming out, and hopefully, and much more advanced than what we've been doing lately on what we're going to be talking about the next week.
Yeah. Let's see. Next week we're talking with some of the Red Hat accelerators folks.
Yep.
So real live OpenShift admins that are going to come on and talk about some of their experiences and stuff like that. So that one's exciting. I think the week after that is July 5th. So the 4th is a holiday here in the US. But as far as I know, we're still planning on streaming on the 5th. So
6th.
6th?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because the 4th is a Monday. So thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, as far as I know, we're still planning. I don't know if we have a topic for that week. The 13th, Johnny, I'll be in a training class, so Johnny will be hosting. He'll be doing everything, and I think we're going to be joined by Reese. I don't know what we're talking about with Reese yet, but yeah, we did some planning last week, so now we've got episodes, I think, all except for the 6th out through the end of July at least. So
yeah, we got a lot going on, and the cool part is it's a lot of the a lot of the stuff that Jimmy's doing too, like where it's the edge, working our way from the edge to the data center. So like there's a lot of good topics coming up.
Yeah, RHOPE 9. Requesting 12 CPU when you mean 120 millicpu or something like that, or I like, some people think that the requests are like an assignment of resources, which they are, but it's like, if I don't assign through a request my pod to have some resources, it won't have access to any resources, and stuff like that, which might be true if it's super overcommitted for a node or something like that. And by overcommit, I mean like without a limit, you can technically have hundreds of CPUs worth of resources inside of or without a request. You can have hundreds of CPUs worth of resources assigned to limits. I had that backwards. And that'll work fine until there's contention. So even though any one pod might not be able to consume more than one CPU, if there's 200 pods on there, that limit total would be like 200 CPUs. Maybe you've only got 64 on the node. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that until those 64 CPUs are extinguished. And then it'll start doing the eviction thing, and it'll start denying scheduling and all of that stuff. So yeah, you do have to be careful. What is it? It's a limit range. So you can use a limit range to both assign default. So if the admin or the developer team doesn't assign a requester limit, you can assign defaults as well as maximum values. Right? We're not going to let the developer accidentally cripple our cluster because they meant 120 millicPUs and actually typed in 120 CPUs, and now there's all kinds of crazy things going on. You're getting kicked out, aren't you, Johnny? No?
I flexed.
All right. Let's talk about Advanced Cluster Manager. So as we said at the top of the show, Advanced Cluster Manager 2.5 was released back June 8th, which was about a week and a half ago now. And there was a ton of stuff inside of that announcement. So internally, I saw the email about it, right? There was a bunch of stuff that went GA, a bunch of stuff that went tech preview, dev preview, and stuff like that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Jimmy, what are the things that we should know about 2.5? And I know you've got a bunch of stuff like staged and ready for us here.
I do actually. So if you can go ahead. Oh, perfect. You pressed the right button. Very cool. All right. I can see that. It's a pro now. You're a pro. So before we get into 2.5, I feel like it is important a little bit to kind of have a little bit of a refresher of what ACM is, maybe like a 3 to 4 minute like quick intro of what it is and what it can do for you. And then we can dive into some of the features for 2.5 based on the questions that I see on the chat. Seems like, we should have like this little refresher. But so Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes, or ACM, or RACM, right? We like to abbreviate things here at Red Hat, is basically a management tool that sits on top of your OpenShift cluster. It is installed as an operator. So you can very quickly go into OpenShift, go into your operators, search for Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes, and install it right up to your OCP instance. Now, once you get it installed and ready to go, this is the main introduction window. And the first thing that you will notice right away is that we kind of break down all of the different use cases that we can do with ACM. So first we have the overview, which, I saw a question in the chat if we did any kind of graphing or kind of alerting of clusters. And of course we do. With the overview, you're able to kind of see what's going on with your clusters, whatever. Again, those might be OCP clusters or non-OCP clusters. We can monitor the health. We can search through all of them and identify potential issues, or look at applications. We can look at everything directly from this overview pane. We of course have the cluster management. So from day one, where we can build the cluster for you. Currently today, we can only do OCP clusters to build them from ACM. We can import any kind of cluster, as we talked about, like EKS, AKS, GKE, right? We can import them and manage those clusters, but unfortunately, we cannot create them today just yet. It's something that it's on the roadmap. We're going to be working very hard to adding that, because a lot of our customers are in a very much hybrid cloud situation. Some on-prem OpenShift, even off-prem OpenShift, as well as with some mixed, native cloud like EKS, for example. We, of course, have the application engine, which the application engine allows you to kind of manage all of your applications as well as build these applications, not only from a subscription level, kind of leveraging like GitHub, Helm charts, right, and bringing those into ACM. We can also do it from a Red Hat GitOps perspective with Argo CD. So if you have leveraged already the investment of having Argo CD within your environment and you're deploying applications through there, we can bring those applications into ACM and simplify that management, right? Because one of the downfalls for Argo CD, well, you can have application sets now that can run in multiple, one Argo CD for multiple, it becomes a little cumbersome, right? You can have a lot of different Argo CD instances. It's a little bit complicated to manage, especially if you have a very hybrid type of environment. And then finally, we have the governance and security. So for the governance, we allow you to create not only your own kind of homemade policies, right? So obviously, every organization has these policies, from limiting the root users or cube admins, right, to the set of passwords, how long the password might be, right, certificates, any kind of policy that you can think of that applies to really a Kubernetes environment, you can go ahead and create it here. We offer a lot of policies that are based on standards like NIST, HIPAA, PCI. So we do leverage some of those standards already out of the box. We have a Git repo with a lot of those policies already. We can also leverage things like OPA, and much, much more, right? So the governance engine is one of the strongest parts, as well as the cluster lifecycle, right, when it comes to ACM. And then finally, this is for brand new for 2.5, we added a MultiCluster Networking. This is something that was a tech preview in 2.3 and 2.4 when we first introduced it. It's basically leverages Submariner. Submariner is an add-on that allows you to have internet network connectivity between two or more clusters without having to go through and open up special ports and configure firewalls or any of that nature. So it makes it really simple and really easy for you to be able to go and create that connection between your clusters, right? So that's a high-level overview of what ACM can do and what we're working with, right? So let's go ahead and dive.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
I want to unpack a bunch of these things inside of here because
Sure.
a lot of it is really, like you said, multi-cluster networking, which is Submariner underneath the covers, allows us to create effectively a logical network between multiple clusters so that they can talk to each other just like they're a part of the same cluster. If I remember correctly, we just have to avoid having overlapping cluster network subnets when we do that. Otherwise, it gets confused.
Right.
The applications one, that one was really cool to me because I was familiar with like 2.4 and earlier, where you could point it at a Git repo, but it wasn't it wasn't Argo. It wasn't using, the application sets and the other GitOps, type of things. Whereas now you can use the same paradigm across all of those, which to me is really, really cool. I also learned a neat trick from Scott, who I see Scott's in chat here, with the governance and the policies. You can use that not just to apply like security policies and standards, but to ensure that make sure this application is installed or this operator is present, and these other things are inside of there. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, this is like you mentioned, right? So some of these features existed in 2.4. They were, tech preview, and they're now finally moving into a full, GA status for 2.5. So that's all great. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into a little bit of some of these things, right? So the first thing that you'll notice if you worked with ACM previously, right, is that the overview screen looks a little bit tiny different, right? So we have improved a little bit the look and feel here. We also have now a tight integration with console.redhat.com if you want to leverage insights. So for those of you that know, Red Hat Insights is, allows you to have visibility into issues that you might have for your environment. It was originally built for RHEL, but it has now expanded into OpenShift and much, much more, right? So you can actually have that tight integration here, and you can see all those issues right here. And then, of course, you can click on it and dive deeper if you wanted to. As we talked about, obviously, we do have that integration with Grafana to allow you to kind of see all that information that kind of Andrew was showing earlier, right? So some of the stuff that you were looking at, like how overestimated your CPUs are, how much requests that you have, how much utilized you actually have, right? Same goes for memory, right? You can kind of see here all of the information that we provide you completely out of the box. That way you don't have to sit and kind of guess, right? You can kind of see that, for example, we have an overestimation here for this one cluster, and you can go ahead and dive deeper into that, and you can see the resource utilization for that specific cluster. Again, we support this for OCP, as well as any like GKE or EKS, right? So any clusters that you might import that are non-OCP clusters, you can kind of see this information. So you can kind of see here very quickly, right, what your memory requests are, and what are some of the networking, the main top networking instances, right? What are the top namespaces that are using some of those CPUs requests, and what the utilization is. So it really simplifies, and it makes it much, much easier for you to consume this information. You can also go and build some of these dashboards. So we provide you, like I said, a few out of the box. But if you want, we enable you to go and build your own custom dashboard. So a lot of operations are looking at very specific dashboards that kind of want to take a look at, and want to take a look at a specific data that they really kind of care about, right? They can go and build their own dashboard. They can also export this data and leverage other tools to kind of graph it if you're not familiar with Grafana, right? But out of the box, this is a fantastic feature to be able to kind of quickly see what's going on from your environment right from ACM, really. I mean, you just launch it right from there.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying before of like managing individual clusters is fine if you have a couple of them. If you have more than like 2, 3, 4, it gets out of control. And especially like, I have this, some of the strategies that we see customers using for when they have multiple clusters, this entire application team gets their own cluster, or this entire business unit gets their own cluster. And so trying to manage resources across all of those is hard. Like stuff like this just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, resources drift everything, right? I mean, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does simplify it, right? Because like you said, it gets really complicated, especially once you have, more than two or three or four clusters really to keep track. It's difficult because if you have some in Azure, some in Google, some in EKS, right, you have to keep jumping to their different kind of portals to really manage them when you can just come to ACM and manage kind of everything here, right? So you can kind of see here, this is the cluster screen, right? And as I've mentioned before, we have the ability to create clusters on any type of infrastructure as long as they're OCP clusters. So you can see here that we can create them on AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, on top of vSphere, which is a huge use case that we see a lot of our customers, right, that run OCP on vSphere. So we simplify that process. It can be a little complicated to do that. And don't fear, we do see that bare metal here says deprecated. That's a new thing for 2.5. Don't fear. If you go ahead and click on it, you can see right on top of it that we're switching more into the assistant installer, right? So we were leveraging the infrastructure provider previously, and with determination to move away from that and leveraging the assistant installer. So the assistant installer will continue to provide that bare metal support that's needed for a lot of our customers, right? That deploy on bare metal.
And I want to take a moment to talk about multi-cluster engine operator, because one of the things that I actually didn't know about, not that I would have expected to know about it because there's like 10,000 things going on at any one time, is with 2.5, we separated out the multi-cluster engine operator from advanced cluster management. And it is ACM depends on MCE, but you can deploy MCE without ACM. So I wanted to kind of talk about, one, what functionality does MCE bring, and then why was that separated from ACM?
Yeah, I think it's just a decision that was made, like at the OpenShift level. Really, it just kind of makes sense to kind of go with the assistant installer. One thing that Scott kind of pointed out on the chat, which is true. Now the assistant installer is fully GA on 2.5. So again, it's just for those folks that were leveraging the old method, right? We still keep that there for them, but we want them to obviously kind of move away more into the assistant installation because it's kind of like what we standardize across OpenShift platform, right?
And for all those folks who are asking, how can I do assisted installer on-prem? This is how.
That's right. Exactly. You can just drive it through with ACM. And if you don't like the UI, that's fine. You can go ahead and build your YAML and put it right here, and leverage that as well. Of course, you can leverage a CLI if you wanted to. There's multiple ways that you can do this, right? Obviously, not everybody likes the UI and driving things through UI, right? So, but you do have the ability to kind of do that as well. So really great way of doing and managing your clusters. Obviously, I'm not going to go ahead and kind of walk through the flow of building a cluster. It's pretty straightforward, right? One thing that obviously, highlighting obviously around importing clusters, right? So as I mentioned, you can go ahead and import EKS, GKE, AKS, any kind of non-OCP cluster through ACM. Pretty straightforward to do, right? You basically select your name, right? And then we can actually execute that command for you. We can send you a kubeconfig, or you can run that command and import it manually. So you have multiple options on how you can actually execute this. So if you're doing, like, say, a batch of clusters that you're importing, you can export the commands, right, and leverage something like Ansible Automation Platform to kind of bring those into ACM. That's one use case that we can think of around there, right? Speaking of that whole integration with Ansible Automation Platform has also been enhanced quite a bit for this release, right? Because it's something that a lot of our customers have asked for, and we've seen a lot of traction there when it comes to that, right? So
I also wanted to ask about, I think we call it central infrastructure management, and it falls under that infrastructure environments tab there.
That's right.
So this one I thought was really cool in that effectively you can use if I'm understanding correctly, basically you're using the assisted installer like mechanism of booting to an ISO, and then the node comes up and it registers in this central infrastructure environment. Sorry for banging into my microphone arm. So you basically build this list of assets of hosts that you have, and then you can go in and say, I want to create a new cluster. I want to use these. I've got 30 hosts that are registered. I want to use these 6 and create a new cluster, and then I'm going to create a second cluster. I'm going to use this different 5 nodes, and so on and so forth. So it gives you that ability to, as the administrator, you just boot up all of your nodes. I have visions of this, particularly like for a long time, it was a battle with VMware administrators of, I need you to like attach this VM property, or I need you to boot this CoreOS ISO, but not until I'm ready to do it. So that way I can stage everything. Well, now you can tell them, yeah, just boot the ISO. It boots up, it joins the ACM interface. And then when you're ready, you go in and you provision the cluster. So to me, it provisions that whole, or it simplifies the whole provisioning process for a lot of these scenarios where the team that's responsible for the infrastructure and the team that's responsible for OpenShift are, I'll say, disconnected, right? They're siloed. They're working to get some of those things done is hard.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the times, right, especially when you're doing bare metal environments, right, it's always like you kind of submit a ticket in most organizations, right? You submit a ticket, it kind of goes into a vacuum, right? Then the infrastructure team kind of takes their time to stand up the server, and or maybe they do have the server already stand up, but they have to configure the networking and all of that. Here's a little more simple, right? Because you can pre-build that infrastructure and have it kind of ready here within your infrastructure environments in order for you to bring them into ACM, right? So it simplifies that. You can also leverage labels. So you can grab those labels and kind of leverage the whole power of labels within the ACM to kind of leverage those. So yeah, it is a very powerful tool that kind of eliminates a little bit of the tedious work that you have to kind of go through, right? And kind of work with the infrastructure team, which sometimes kind of can move a little bit slower, right? You
Not
can
that we don't
give
like
them a little bit
working
of
with
buffer.
those guys. It's just
No. I was an infrastructure guy. When I first started about 20 years ago. So I get it. Those guys are overworked, right? And it's understandable. But if everybody has deadlines, right? So making sure that you have this infrastructure ready to go, it's always a good thing, right? So
I always think back to when Johnny and I worked together, a decade ago, and like we were administrators for something, and hey, I need a new virtual machine, and the VMware team operates off of the principle of being able to very quickly create repeatable stamps, if you will, right? You want a VM, 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM, or whatever it happens to be. They click the button and that's what you get. And when you have to deviate from that, it makes things so much harder and takes so much longer, because now they have to go in, and instead of relying on automation, it's okay, now a human has to go in and create this VM and attach this ISO and
exactly.
not the ISO, but attach the VM properties, right? When we're doing VM, UPI installs for things like the static IP config or attaching the ignition and all of that. Now we can move away from that. It's just attach an ISO.
Exactly. It's just attach an ISO. Make sure that you have some kind of networking, whatever it might be, DHCP or not, and boot it up and off you go, right?
Yep.
So it is a great way. So one thing that I wanted to talk about, the cluster lifecycle, which, for 2.5, that's kind of new, right? So to go back a little bit, right? So we do have a new provider, which is the Red Hat virtualization. So we have gotten a lot of requests for current and new Red Hat virtualization customers that want to be able to leverage the ability to deploy clusters, OCP clusters there. So we have added this as a provider on 2.5. We have also have the ability to support the ARM architecture. As we're seeing, obviously, we started this shift a few years ago with RHEL, and we are kind of working through all of our products to kind of support ARM architectures, right? ARM architectures are have been around for a long time, but they're becoming more and more popular, especially when it comes to single node use cases, right? So it's important to kind of have that support there, so you can we can not only kind of import and manage clusters that are ARM based, but you can also install the hub, which is where what ACM runs in. Basically, you can actually have it run on an ARM infrastructure as well. So just keep in mind that creating a new OCP is currently on tech preview. Hopefully it will be GA here shortly, but just keep that in mind. We're talking about that, right?
Yeah, and we're in the last final, like waiting for just one more approval stages of updating the subscription guide, which includes details on like where, among other things, ACM, the architectures it can deploy to, as well as the ones that it supports managing and all that other stuff. So keep an eye on the link for that.
Yeah, and another important point to show and kind of highlight here is that we can now support the hosted control planes with Hypershift. So Hypershift is something that made it into obviously OCP, and now of course we are adopting that very much and driving it through ACM, right? So we can actually go and build Hypershift clusters. Currently, there is no UI for it. This is why it's tech preview. It's all driven through a command line, I believe. Sully, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys did a show with Gurney on a Hypershift. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at that, it's something that, if that interests you, that might be worth it.
Yeah, I had the link for that. Now I've lost it. So the Gurney, who is the host of the Cloud Multiplier live stream, which is Gurney's a part of the ACM team. So their first episode, which was like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, they did a live demo of Hypershift. So, or sorry, what are we calling it now? It's a hosted control plane.
Hosted control plane. Yes, that's why I said both names.
Yeah.
We like to change constantly, but yes, hosted control plane, aka Hypershift. So that way it's no confusion there. But yeah, if you need to go take a look at that, but basically it's just the ability to kind of build the same way that you can build clusters here. You can do it, you can do it via the UI. You can build your Hypershift clusters. All right, so moving on a little bit into the application and application sets, right? So we talked a little bit about how, with ACM, we have a huge commitment of supporting applications, right? Supporting applications, especially when it comes to Red Hat GitOps, right? So with the addition of obviously having that with Argo CD, we have the ability now to kind of come in here and actually load up an application set, right? So you can take an application set that exists within your Argo CD server. So you will just configure your credentials for that Argo CD server, bring it into as an application set, and then you can bring that application right into ACM to leverage all of the benefits that you get when you have an application from ACM, right? From having that wonderful topology view that allows you to kind of see what's going on with your application, see what the multiple components of your applications are, and kind of manage it exactly the same way that you will manage any kind of subscription-based application from ACM. This is huge. This is something, again, that we had introduced, in earlier versions, and now we have fully gone GA. So for those customers that are leveraging Argo CD today and are struggling with managing those applications through Argo CD because it can be quite complicated, ACM might be your solution. So just keep in mind now that, it is fully GA, right? So.
Yeah, I just tested this yesterday. I actually did a demo on this where we deployed multiple ACM or multiple clusters through ACM, and then deployed an application through ACM using Argo CD on the back end. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it works really, really well. And again, for existing applications, this is the key value here, right? If you're already working with applications within your organization with Argo CD, to bring those and onboard them into ACM is as quick as I show you, right? You just basically, you provide your credentials, you go and configure your application and just bring it in, and that's it. You get started and going with ACM very quickly, right? So just something to keep in mind when talking about that.
And I broke chat in my window here, so I brought it up in Twitch. so I'm catching up a little bit. So RHOPE 9 highlighted the multi-cluster management interface in the OpenShift Admin console, which is tech preview, and he's
That's
right.
right.
So that's going to be different. And that one, the way it was explained to me by Ali, was it's very similar in experience to what you get with Cockpit, when you have one host that is the Cockpit interface for multiple other hosts. So in the upper corner, there'll be like a drop down where you can say, I want to manage this cluster, or I want to manage that cluster, which is going to be different than ACM acting as that hub where you can do things like application sets, policy sets that, push out across all of those.
It's basically a subset of the functionality that really exists from an ACM perspective when it comes to managing your clusters, right? That's now a part of OpenShift. It's just to simplify it for those smaller organizations where they might have one or two clusters that are just kind of getting started, right? That's really who the MC engine really is for, right? So keep that in mind. It's not a replacement for an ACM at all. It's just the baby steps into ACM, if you will, right? So a lot of the functionality really came from ACM. So
hey, and Jimmy, before you move on, one thing I just wanted to back up a little bit. Like for those that aren't aware, like when you install the ACM operator, this interface after the operator deploys, you'll see a pop-up that happens that says refresh your console for refresh your window for an updated console, and then this menu over on the left becomes part of the accordion, and so then you can either click on local cluster or manage all the clusters. So then you don't really, as a user or an admin, have to do anything. You can still use the same interface, and you're just clicking a different link.
Yeah, and when you say the same interface, it's basically this interface right here. Yep. Exactly. Just right from here, you'll basically be able to have, just like you have the advanced cluster manager for Kubernetes, you'll have another option down here for the multi-cloud engine. So absolutely. No, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Johnny, for bringing that up.
Yeah,
all right, so
Jimmy, before you go on, there's a question from Dwayne here about how does the customer know the cost of each cluster? And I think the answer for that comes from the cost management feature.
That's
on
right.
console.redhat.com. So if you go there, you can plug in and connect your various accounts. So you can connect your AWS account, and it'll automatically pull in all the information, and you'll be able to see like what the historical cost and I think what the projected cost of the cluster is.
That's right.
In real dollars.
Yep. There's nothing that we have right from ACM to do that, but like you said, through console.redhat.com, you have that ability to kind of see all of that. So yeah, absolutely. All right, so very quickly, just kind of want to highlight the ability to kind of talk about Submariner, right, and kind of how that kind of works, right? So as I mentioned, Submariner is just an open source tool that really allows you to have that direct networking between one or more Kubernetes clusters, right? I believe somebody in the chat actually it allows SDN, right? So that's at the end of the day, that's basically what it is. But it allows you to basically, you have to build one or two more clusters, right? So you can have, as you can see here, that, for example, I created a cluster set here with 4 of my clusters. And then you can come in here and basically install the Submariner, right? So you'll have to select what some of the target clusters are, right? In this case, I don't have any other clusters here, but you can add, 2 or more, right? You need 2 or more. And then once you go over here, you can deploy basically the add-on for Submariner. So when you deploy the add-on, what this is doing in the back end is deploying the operator, configuring the operator for you, and making sure that you can have that connection. You just have to make sure that you do read the documentation. There are specific things that you must have as far as the networking configuration for these clusters, right? They have to make sure that they're in different subnets and things of that nature, right? So there is some steps that you need to make sure before you go into that, right? Make sure you read that documentation. Again, it's very well documented. So, make sure you read that. But basically, once you do that, then you have your clusters that kind of looks like this, right? In this case, I degraded it because I pulled a cluster out earlier on the week. But basically, you'll have both clusters sitting here with a connection status, with the agent status, and the gateway kind of non-degraded like they're showing here, right? They will be showing in green status, if you will. But it automatically does all of this for you and configures and sets all that up. So it really simplifies a lot of the guessing game that you will have to do if you are doing this, basically on your own, right? So ACM is all about saving time, simplifying and making it much easier, right, to kind of do that. So
and Christian asked, does Submariner use IPsec to encrypt connections between the clusters?
I'm not quite sure about that one, actually. I'm gonna have to kind of find out. I can check on that one if we can I'll take a note of that, and we'll put it on the Q&A afterwards.
So one of the things that I don't think we've talked about yet during this session, but we talked about a while ago with Annette, was the application DR using OpenShift Data Foundation, and so ODF and ACM. Does that require Submariner?
No, it does not require Submariner.
Okay.
No.
So, and to be clear, so I'll dig up the link for that here in just a moment, but that's GA now as well with 2.5, if I recall correctly.
Correct. So yeah, so the ability to take your clusters, your not only your hub cluster, but also any kind of clusters that you're managed within ACM, and you're able to create a backup of these. So we leverage, like you said, Red Hat ODF to do that, and we can actually create a backup not only, like I said, of the hub, with the state of everything within the hub, from the clusters to the applications to the policies, all within there, and you're able to kind of restore them on the other side, right? So this is fantastic feature to have, because we had a lot of customers that had a lot of DR, HA kind of needs. And so now the ability to kind of take this and kind of move it over very quickly if you have a failure on your main ACM instance is quite big, right? So
yeah, and I see Scott, who's in chat. Thank you for your help,
yep.
Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Always on top of everything.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
So he confirmed that you can use IPsec with Submariner to encrypt that traffic between clusters. And one thing that I wanted to point out is Jimmy is right in that 2.5 introduced DR for ACM Hub itself, but also for applications. So the ODF, and they both rely on ODF.
Yep.
But back when, and I posted the link into chat. So when Annette joined us on episode 55, she showed the Ramen project, which is basically a cloud native way of setting up replication for the persistent storage, and then using ACM as the coordination engine for all of the other, and OADP, the OpenShift API for data protection, to coordinate, backing up, protecting all of the other, assets, the things that define an application. So it's this, set of things that are now integrated, coordinated through ACM, so that I can do that disaster recovery type of scenario for those applications inside of OpenShift. So to be clear, it's not like it's not going to do high availability type of stuff. So you can't have like two clusters that are running and it's constantly replicating between each other and coordinated through ACM. Like, it's true disaster recovery, right? It coordinates storage replication. It coordinates backing up the assets, the YAML files that define your application. And then when something happens, it restores that into the destination cluster. But
yep.
I thought it was really cool. And it's something that I think a lot of folks have been asking about for a while.
Yeah, and one last thing I wanted to show, because we're a little bit over the time, right? But I wanted to show one of all the new features of 2.5, which is what we call policy sets, right? So you'll notice here that if I go into the governance, if you worked with ACM previously, you'll notice this overview screen is new. We have separated it. Before we had it right on top of the policy. So you had your policies, and then you had the overview screen. Now you have a separate overview screen that you can kind of see what's going on with your environment. So that's pretty cool. And then we have this ability to do policy sets, right? So basically what policy sets, as the name kind of suggests, is a combination of policies, right? So you can take, sometimes there is multiple sets of policies that might apply to a specific set of clusters, right? So instead of having to go through each individual policy and assign that individual policy to those clusters, you can group them, right, into what we call policy sets, right? So pretty straightforward, right? But it's a great feature that a lot of our customers with several thousand of policies that are managing have requested, right? Just think about it. If there might be a specific set of policies that you apply to your production clusters, right, or your development clusters, that instead of having to go through each single one, you can just go create a policy set, bring those policies in there, and off to the races you are. So this is a great feature that, again, is fully GA. It's available on 2.5, and you can build those policies as you wish, or your policy sets. So you can kind of see here all of the different policies that exist today. You can kind of see we have a couple of them that we kind of have built in here, right? We have a Git repo too that has a bunch of policies, not only from community policies, but also Red Hat type policies that I recommend you take a look at. I'll throw the link here in a bit in the chat. But you can kind of see also that obviously, we continue with the integration with Ansible. So, there was a question around having a specific Ansible/ACM ACM session. And that's something that we can look into, and we can certainly do. It's something that people have asked for. But basically what this allows you to do is kind of do pre and post tasks, just like you can do it from the cluster lifecycle, from the application lifecycle, and the governance lifecycle, right? So you can do pre and post tasks. And you can integrate it with an Ansible automation platform, right? And you can kind of see that execution of that right from here, right? So it just enhances the interaction with those third-party tools. So you can think of use cases like opening tickets with, say, Remedy or ServiceNow or any kind of ticketing system, or interacting with an F5 load balancer to open ports. The possibilities are really endless, right? What you can do with, once you bring Ansible automation platform into the mix.
You can use those pre and post to Ansible playbooks with cluster provisioning too, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So with cluster provisioning, if you're going to build a new cluster, you select your cluster here, and I go and look at my automation screen. You can actually select what we call an automation template, and this allows you to kind of see. You can see here some of them, the ones that we have created, right? That you have install and upgrade tasks. So you can run pre and post on the install, or pre and post on the upgrade, right? We didn't really touch about that, but of course with ACM, you can manage and do all your OCP upgrades. If you have any interactions there, for example, let me open up a ticket before I actually go and upgrade my cluster. That's something that you might want to do, that you can have that Ansible automation task in there.
What came to mind for me is, let's say we're using the central infrastructure management, and I want to use an external load balancer. Can I create an Ansible playbook that will go out and configure that external load balancer for my 3 load balanced endpoints, and then kick off the cluster install process after that? Or is that, I don't know if it focuses on IPI or if you can do, UPI non-integrated type deployments.
You could with Ansible, you could do, you could have a playbook to do that. Absolutely, you could. So yeah, it's just something we'll do a more focused session around this, to kind of drive some of the, since there seems to be quite a bit of interest, right? But basically that's pretty much it. I mean, this release, we kind of touch very high level, right? But you can see this is a very full packed release. We have YouTube videos that go more into depth into some of these features if you want to dive into it. Or if you guys have any other features that you really want to really dive into, please let us know, like Ansible, right? And we can go ahead and get the right resources and talk about it.
Yeah, one of the things that if you look at the roadmap for OpenShift and for ACM, you see a lot of the stuff that's being set up in this release. In particular, with like all of the edge device management. I think this was the release that they bumped the number, y'all bumped the number of single node OpenShift clusters that can be managed to like 2,000 or something crazy.
That's
like
right.
that. So
Yep.
It's very much like for customers who have, think retail, think, all of these other things where I have a bunch of small clusters that are spread out all over the place. All of the pieces are falling into place where now we can make it just so much easier to manage the entire lifecycle of those clusters, from deploying them to doing upgrades to doing application deployments and application management. Like, it's really becoming this super strong, super robust tool for that. So I'm excited to see what's going on. I think that's some of the stuff we were hoping to talk with Reese about, is kind of the end-to-end edge strategy type stuff. I guess we'll actually have to talk to Reese and make sure that he's ready and willing to talk about that.
Yeah, and we didn't cover that too, but like within your cluster lifecycle, you can also build single node clusters, right? So if you wanted to, for edge use cases, like it's the perfect use case there, where you are very limited to space. You are kind of in a disconnected, environment, right? You can have an ACM running completely disconnected, managing those single node clusters, right? So start thinking about some of those use cases when we talk edge, right? You can build all your clusters, manage all your clusters completely disconnected from ACM. You can even do upgrades as long as you have an offline repo of some kind, right? Which is great. So
yeah, for me, like I just go back to like one of my last customers where we were essentially setting up we were essentially going to be a cluster deployer for like their customers, right? So they would have a customer come in and say, hey, I want to run this number of applications, and then we would deploy the cluster to Azure, AWS, GCP, or whatever. We were doing all of this manually, so it's like this is super awesome. Like, this is such an awesome tool.
Yeah, and the hosted control plane, Hypershift stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's easy for everybody to be a service provider, right? For OpenShift. I'm curious to see the once we're able to start publishing the performance and all of that other stuff associated with like how fast Hypershift clusters deploy and how dense we can pack those and all kinds of other stuff. I saw some interesting metrics this morning that I don't think we can share yet. So just so much exciting and interesting stuff happening in 4.11, 4.12, OpenShift 4.11, OpenShift 4.12, ACM 2.5, 2.6. It's, I don't know. I'm never bored in this role, right?
No, it keeps changing all the time. It's if you think that you know everything, you don't. Every 5 seconds is something.
Well,
new.
And it's so funny because I was looking back at some of the material that I had created back in like the 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 days, because I was just doing an inventory of collateral and stuff like that, and remembering like something that we take for granted now, vSphere IPI. That wasn't there until 4.6. So we've come like so far in such a short period of time. OpenShift 4 is 3 years old now. And like just the difference in what we had released with that first 4.1 GA release, and now what we're seeing in 4.10, and go check out the roadmap, and see what's happening in the future. And I don't know, I love this job. I get to play with so much cool technology.
Exactly.
We're always at the bleeding edge, right? Which is great. I love that.
All right. Well, I don't want to. I know we're running about 14 minutes past our normal stop time. So thank you, Jimmy, for being willing to stay over with us and make sure that we cover everything. For our audience, if you have any last minute questions, anything that you didn't think to ask yet, or anything that we might have missed, I admit that I sometimes miss things when we have a bunch of chat scrolling by, stuff like that. So Anything that you didn't ask, please go ahead and submit those in. We'll do our best to answer those here in the last couple of minutes. Apologies for the dog shaking next to me.
We do have one, Andrew.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if we covered it or not. It's about the post-hook and pre-hook jobs. It says, it's from Hasif, and it says, it seems post-hook and pre-hook jobs are still not supported on on-prem deployments, and that they were expecting that in ACM 2.5. Do you know about that, Jimmy?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I gotta look further into that because I'm pretty sure it should work. That shouldn't be an issue. So I'm curious to understand a little bit more about that. But we can further research that and figure it out.
But yeah, I think we answered everything else.
Okay.
Awesome.
For anybody who is watching this not live, which I think is probably the majority of folks, feel free to reach out to us. You can contact me at, let's see, I'm going to do this again. So you can contact me via email at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or social media, Practical Andrew on Twitter, on Reddit, on all of those places. You can also contact Johnny at, let's see, JRockTX1 on social media or Johnny@redhat.com. You giggle because I had to look at it, didn't I? You saw me look at it.
I did.
So feel free to reach out to us at any point in time. We love getting email from y'all. We love hearing from everybody. I will admit that sometimes my inbox gets busy and Twitter alerts get noisy. So I try my best to respond when I get those things, but please don't be offended if it takes a couple of days. With that, again, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel on whatever platform you're on. We've got a bunch of super interesting topics coming up. You can also follow us on social media, all of that other stuff. If you follow the OpenShift account, the Red Hat account, you'll see all of our alerts and all that stuff go out too. So with that being said, thank you so much, Jimmy. Really do appreciate you joining us today. This has been super informative, and I'm looking forward to learning more about ACM. I've been hands-on more with it the last 4 weeks than I have ever before, and it has done nothing but make me more excited. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew and Johnny, for having me. I appreciate always being here. Love being here and sharing with everybody. And we'll have more sessions around some of the more specific topics as we dive through. So, but thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on.
And Stephanie, who I strongly suspect will be watching us after, not live afterwards. I not that I didn't respect your job before, but man, I am so glad you are here, and thank you for all of the help that you do. Because trying to do all of this at the same time is it's a little
stressful.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not comfortable with it. I'm definitely not familiar with it, and I'm sitting here looking at the chat in our interface, and it says you need to log in. I'm like, log into what? I'm already logged in, so I don't know what I did to break the chat. Sorry in advance, Stephanie. And last but not least, as always, thank you, Johnny. I'll leave last words with you.
Yeah, I just repeat what you said, right? Thank you, Jimmy. Like, this was really awesome. I'm just gonna keep digging away at ACM because, like I said, I did a demo on it yesterday, and it was pretty awesome. So, like, I'm looking forward to kind of putting all the pieces together and seeing it work.
Awesome. Well, you didn't get kicked out of the room, so you definitely were flexing hard there. So,
dude,
good
that's
job.
how I roll. Naturally aggressive. So
Awesome. All right, everyone. Take care.
See ya.